let me just officially open this session that we have that is scheduled for every Tuesday from 5:30 till 7:30, colleagues. Thank you for being able to make time to join this session, colleagues. With that said, colleagues, I have officially opened the session. And Prof, let me officially hand in the session to you.
Okay. Let me take this opportunity to thank you all for once more joining us on this important day, and hope that we have another exciting session ahead of us. And you're all welcome, and hope you had a week of reflection on what we spoke about last week. So without further ado, let's then just see what we're intending to talk about today, largely. Not much different from what we started off with, but we're just going to try to see if we can demystify some of the concepts that are predominantly available within the research space. Remember, the idea is not for you to regurgitate them, to know them by heart, but the idea is just to really have an understanding and an appreciation of what they represent in the main. So basically that's it. So that at least when somebody speaks to you and sounding sophisticated, talking about empiricism, epistemology, phenomenology, and all that, you have an idea, you know. That's basically what it is, ladies and gentlemen. It's really not to make you sound too difficult to relate to, but just for you to appreciate what they represent within the research. So perhaps there are one or two issues that you'd like to talk about, and we get on with our conversation. Remember, this is not a teaching class, it is a facilitation of learning. So let me hear what is in your mind. Anyone who wants to talk about anything that they feel we need to touch on today? And again, we are in a qualitative space. Sometimes we plan this way and we end up going the other way. It's pretty much the way sometimes research goes. You're allowed to think about rugby and you talk about war, you know. So that's what the qualitative nature of a study can do as well. It's allowed. Refilo, what is in your mind?
Well, I submitted the 2-page research outline, and I'm still waiting to be allocated a supervisor.
Oh, okay. What is the 2-page about? Let's talk about it. What is the outline about?
Okay, so I am doing the Masters in Family Law, and my topic is legal rights and protection for unmarried fathers in South Africa.
Legal
rights and protection for unmarried fathers in South Africa.
Oh, okay.
Yes.
What about that? What is the curiosity from you about it? The legal rights and the protection of, is it unmarried fathers, you say?
Yes, unmarried fathers in that country.
What piqued your interest on that?
What piqued my interest was seeing that there's a difference in treatment when it comes to fathers and mothers, you know, about their children. Fathers usually don't have access as much as the mothers do. So I decided on looking on that, and I'm going to be including the Children's Act. And obviously we know that the mothers are usually the legal guardians. So yes, I decided to look onto that and see if there can be reforms that actually I don't know, somehow put the fathers on the same level with the mothers, because at the end of the day they are the parents of the children as well. So
Okay.
I'm not sure if that will be approved or not.
I'm sure it will be, but allow us to talk to you about that. So where does this observation come from? You are saying you notice that there is no equal treatment, or I don't want to put words in your mouth, but the treatment between mothers and fathers insofar as children, the rights of children is concerned, is not the same. Is that what you're saying?
Yes,
That's your
that is what I'm
that's
saying.
your is that is what we call your hypothesis. In other words, that is your assumption, right?
Yes.
Do you have specific areas that you want to talk about insofar as that unequal treatment, or that which is a concern for you? You know, it's about. In other words,
Well,
yeah, okay, go ahead.
if I can, I wanted to ask if I can read the introduction for the 2-page outline, if that's okay, Prof.
Yeah, that's okay.
Oh, okay.
Please do.
So my introduction is unmarried fathers in South Africa historically faced significant legal disadvantages, often being excluded from parental rights unless granted by the courts. The position has shifted with the enactment of the Children's Act 38 of 2005, which introduced a more progressive and child-centered framework. Nonetheless, the practical enforcement of these rights, inconsistencies in interpretation, and societal perceptions continue to generate legal uncertainties. Recent commentary from South African family law practitioners highlights ongoing challenges in acquiring parental responsibilities and rights automatically, establishing paternity, navigating disputes with mothers, and obtaining court recognition. So this research will critically analyze the current legal framework to determine whether unmarried fathers are adequately protected and whether reforms are necessary to enhance parental equality.
Wow, interesting. But then what is it that made you, there's a very important distinction you have made. We'll talk to issues around units of analysis soon. You're talking about unmarried, did you say unmarried fathers? Did I hear you say unmarried fathers?
Yes, unmarried fathers.
So you're not interested in the married ones, you're not interested. So basically you're talking about unmarried fathers and their rights to parental responsibilities.
Yes, sir.
So what are, and I'm just triggering this conversation because the research discussion. Why unmarried fathers?
Unmarried fathers, because usually there are no disputes. When the parents are married, they are going to raise the children together, and there's no need for disputes. But when the parents are not married and they're not living together, usually the mother has the rights to the child, and they raise them and all of that, and the fathers are excluded in most of the things. So that is why I decided to go with unmarried fathers.
Yes, it is very interesting because basically what you're saying is that they are parent, basically they are not married, but they've got a responsibility towards children, so unmarried, but they've got responsibility. So you're discussing variables as in you're unmarried, so there must be some kind of legal rights for people who are unmarried, and there are parental responsibility for people that are unmarried. So basically I'm saying there's no marriage in between both of them, but their relationship is related to parental responsibilities. But how do you reconcile the two? Parental responsibilities for unmarried parents. What are the responsibilities for unmarried parents? These are not dispute. We are not talking at a dispute level, right? You are not talking about where there's a dispute, because they can be unmarried, but cooperating with each other. Am I right?
Yes, that is true.
So unmarried fathers and the parental responsibilities does not necessarily emerge simply because there's conflict. Now, let me understand you, and other people on this platform are welcome to talk. Let me understand what you mean by, I understand and I fully understand where you're coming from. what happens if they are unmarried, right? As individuals, and they are discharging the parental responsibilities. What are we talking about?
I guess I was thinking I'll be looking at things like having access to the child, maybe sharing the time equally, and sharing the responsibility, just being present in the child's life as much as the mother is present in the child's life.
Yes, I hear that. So what happens
Yes.
so that will be, now where there's no dispute, such issues do not necessarily need an intervention of the court. Am I right?
That is true.
So I'm saying in your framing of the situation, you need to just educate me on what is it that we do as unmarried couple insofar as discharging parental responsibilities are concerned. Are they covered in law or are they not?
Prof, that's something that I still have to look at.
Okay. So you are
Yes.
then saying in the main, now let's move to a problem. You're now saying, well, maybe that is something positive that they are there, they're exchanging weekends together, taking the children for, whatever. They do that which is their parental responsibility. So that's the ideal. Now, in an event that they do not get along, I mean, there are issues now, then there is an issue around where you are saying the law seems to favor the mothers
The
than the
mother.
fathers. So
Yes.
that is in a conflictual situation, right?
Yes.
So can you take me through that briefly? Look, you are not giving me answers because you have not yet done the research. It's just at the observation and at the assumption level. So you are free to make general statements as well. I'm not worried. That's not the purpose of this engagement, to whether you are
Okay.
right or wrong.
I think in that context, I will look at, whether the father has the power to make decisions when it comes to the child as much as the mother does. And also remember the interest of the child is the one that is, should be prioritized. So
Yeah.
when it comes to that, yes, is it not only the mother and the mother side of the family that has the power to make decisions when it comes to the child and things like that?
Okay. You are
Yes.
of the view that at the moment when there is conflict, and I'm using the word conflict and they said advisedly, you are then, when there is conflict, that doesn't seem to be easy to navigate, in a conflict situation. Is that your
Yes.
view?
Yes. So far, I
Okay.
think that is my view because that is the easiest one. That is the easiest one because when it comes to, the parents being on the same page and co-parenting, it becomes a bit difficult because legally there can be nothing that is raised as far as I'm concerned because there's no conflict between the
Yeah.
two.
Okay. All right. So
Yes.
that is your assumption, Refilwe.
Yes.
Now, do you see what in the last 2 seconds that we have been engaging, what came to mind? What did you pick up from your research situation, if any?
Well, I picked up that I have to be able to narrow it down. If I'm going to carry on with this topic, I'm going to have to be able to narrow it down because when it is brought like that, it does not have, a legal stand from every point. So if I narrow it down and it is specific, then it makes more sense.
No, I'm glad with that observation. I think it's a wonderful observation. It's not to say your topic is wrong. and you said something profound in research, narrow it down, so that we then say not just protection of unmarried fathers, it could be unmarried fathers in a situation which is conflictual, because that seems to be what you're focusing on, isn't it?
Yes, sir.
So in other words, you are saying in a situation where there's conflict, you would like to look at whether or not there is enough or sufficient protection for especially fathers in a situation when they are unmarried and there's conflict. Because in a situation where there's no conflict, you're not going to look into that. I mean, where there's no conflict, things are assumed to be perfect.
Yes.
So no, I'm glad you picked that up, because basically that was the essence of the engagement, just to say narrow it down. And also the other narrowing it down could be, you're not going to look at unmarried fathers in conflict throughout South Africa, because that might also be huge for a study, isn't it? I mean, how many unmarried fathers do you think we have in South Africa?
Yeah, it's a lot. Many.
There could be like millions and millions of them. Now, you might actually just say, look, my interest is unmarried fathers in conflict within a certain geographical location. That's still okay, because all what you're saying is that you might then sample few of those that you want to talk to, if you were to do the actual physical sampling, as well. Does it make sense?
Yes, it does.
But as a legal process that you want to bring about reform, I think it's a brilliant study. It may not go down well, because there might be a debate, from the feminists, the legal. I mean, there are people who are actually saying there's a lot that has favored men, such that right now where we should be is that we should be advantaging women in many respects. That doesn't mean the minorities should not be studied, isn't it?
That is true.
That your choice is, I mean, there might be noise around saying, but why are you focusing on men? Because they've had advantages throughout the life of history, and therefore why don't you look at women? It's the reason why you've got your own reason why you choose to do that which you are doing. So a study is also informed by an interest that you may develop, or curiosity that you have developed yourself on this subject. And it might as well be that it can be, the recommendation of it could look into the reform, the legislative reform, insofar as parental responsibilities are concerned. Now, I'm saying there can be an argument for and an argument against. Have you encountered that already or not yet?
Actually, now when we are talking about it, I'm starting to realize that that's also something that may come up.
And you're ready for that, right?
Yes, I am. I'd like to believe that I am.
Great. Okay. Thank you very much for sharing, Refilwe. But I hope when we get to the discussion, we will get to this discussion hopefully today about how do you choose a topic. As a researcher, you need to be persuaded, but you also need to be clearer in your mind that this is your interest area. So you're not going to be stuck on adjusting a topic. But I think I was interested when you said there's a 2-pager that you have prepared for your supervisor to look into. And I think from where we are today, I would be able to say my view is it's a good topic that you have selected, narrow it down and get on with it. Because I'm already hearing you saying it could lead to some legislative reform. I can already hear you saying there are variables that I want to look into, some of which are how much of the rights are given to parents, just in a normal situation, and how much of those then change as parental responsibility when there's conflict. When there's joy, everything else looks equal. But once people start fighting, you get to know who owns the car, who owns the candles, and who owns everything else. So you are also saying,
yes.
So you're also saying here is normal. Now, under normal circumstances, these are the parental responsibilities. We share them, and we share them without really even being conscious about it. Now, you then move it and say, assuming that is now no longer the case, right? where now, because remember, courts are approached, isn't it? I mean, the court doesn't visit people in their private spaces. I mean, you're in a family law. So they don't
Yes.
come into family spaces. People have to go to them and say, we can't find each other. So can you
True.
please tell us who's right and who's wrong? Can you please
Yes.
adjudicate over our union or our relationship? Is it not like
That
that
is
in the
true.
main?
It
So
is.
so you're then saying these are people, they get along, they get into some relationship, they are blessed with children, and now they no longer see eye to eye. Court would not have been necessary up to that point. When you cannot find yourself, I mean each other on who's doing what, you basically are saying, can we get the third part, the tribunal, to tell us how do we grow these children, how do we share responsibilities and so on. So what is going to be the basis upon which court makes decisions?
Can you repeat
What
that
are
for
the
me?
instruments? So they're going to use the instruments that are applicable, I suppose, to what you are talking about, isn't it?
Yes.
So you are now going to look at all those instruments as a researcher. You're going to study those instruments, investigate them, and see if they are sufficient, under circumstances where there is conflict. Remember, they may not be sufficient even when there's no conflict, but nobody talks about them.
Yes.
So you are only saying, we don't worry. I mean, if the road there's no problem in the road that you're using, there are no potholes, people don't really worry whether there are road signs or the markings are right. It's only when there is a problem that we tend to pay a lot more attention. So you are saying, I'm not going to spend time looking about the positive issues around the protection of children, because it's taken as sufficient. Only when there is
Yes.
no agreement would we then say, let's share these responsibilities, because now
Yes.
we don't get
It's a
along, we
thing
don't
of
see eye to eye. Yeah, please go
yes,
ahead.
it's a thing of don't fix what is not broken.
Yeah,
If it's not
yeah,
broken, then
exactly.
you're not gonna fix it. But yeah.
I mean, for the longest of time, we didn't really worry about the Strait of Hormuz and Iran, right? We didn't really worry about the Middle East and the fact that Dubai and so on can just be, it's an economy that is fragile. So
That's
now there
true.
is war. We all getting awoken to the fact that actually it can happen that we all get into a situation because one country or two countries have decided to create a situation for all of us.
Yes,
So
so it's
research,
worrisome now that we could also be affected.
yes. So when people, that is why you sign a contract with people when they are happy, isn't it, Refilwe? You can't wait for people to sign contract when they are fighting each other.
That's true.
Otherwise, you won't get it. I mean, at work, you get the bonus when the boss is still happy. You're not going to wait for your boss to get upset with you and you say, but you must increase my bonus because I did extremely well about the G20 and everything else. It's not going to work. Obakeng, you've been listening. What is your view on what we've just spoken about, and what do you think? You have a view.
Yes, Professor. I definitely agree with some of the views put forward. Uh, to some extent, I didn't want to take the topic a bit offside because I was a little bit triggered regarding the comment of course, and there's no dispute regarding the fact that men have generally benefited over women for a long period of time, since time immemorial. But also, in the South African context, though, how often does that happen in light of the history of South Africa in specific? That's just something that I was just listening into for, during the deliberations you had with Refilwe. And yeah, I do agree though. It's a very interesting topic that she has. And more specifically, I also do agree with the fact that when it comes to, I guess, entering into contracts, it's much better, I guess, when everyone is more happy and they're more amenable to some of the terms and conditions than having a situation where now people there's sort of tension, disgruntlement, and now you also have to try and get the parties to reach a compromise regarding that those positions. Yeah.
Thank you for that, Obakeng. Now, what you should learn from this conversation, ladies and gentlemen, I see Julia. Once you must learn from this conversation, and again, is the principle that Refilwe mentioned, narrow your selection. So in other words, have interest in the world, but try to see what is happening within your scope of work. And that's very important in research, because it also talks to a whole lot of other principles that we are going to talk about when you say choose your topic. It doesn't mean do not follow what is happening in the world, and it's always going to happen when you want to do research. You know, people always want to study the world, only to find that actually study your own local environment where you've got some kind of control and access is the best way to do your research as well. So I think that point, we must not lose it, is going to be the point that we should always remember as we go along. Another area that we should remember as we are engaging now with what Refilwe was talking about is that she's talking about unmarried fathers, right? Now, that is, the focus is, and this is what I said earlier on, the focus is not on any other persons. It's not about unmarried mothers. It's not about unmarried couples, or married fathers and everybody else. It's not about LGBTIQ. It's not about the nature of stepchildren that needs to be paid for. She's saying unmarried fathers. Why is that important? Because it then defines what in research we are going to call units of analysis. So in other words, her point of discussion is centering around unmarried fathers. So if you bring anything else in her research, she's going to say, well, that's not relevant for my purpose, because the purpose of research is really focusing on, or the inquiry is about unmarried fathers. What about them? Their parental responsibilities as they are protected, or as they're enjoying the rights that are legal. So the legal rights. So then you and I are going to assume that they must have those legal rights. So it is therefore going to be interesting how Refilwe is able to bring those legal rights of unmarried fathers into the fore, so that we look at them and say, how do they apply in a situation where there's conflict? So I can see the research saying, here is my unmarried father's situation, and here are their legal rights, and how do these legal rights, insofar as children are concerned, apply. She's not going to look at I don't want to see, and I don't expect to hear her talking about their legal rights in any other aspect, but I expect her to talk about their legal rights insofar as children are concerned, their own children are concerned. So basically that's what it means in research. You just have to pick areas of study and you focus on them. So we will talk to that a lot more, because it helps to structure your mind. Why? There's always a temptation at times for people to want to, say, this is what I'm going to study. But as they go along, they veer off. They start adding other things that may not be relevant for the study. It doesn't mean don't observe them, note them, but remember what the study is about. But those are some of the questions that we are going to be answering as we go along. In court, and in court, again, in research, we call it internal validity. What does internal validity mean? It simply say, when you are going to look at the court situation, especially within your criminal court platform, they've got a measure around beyond reasonable doubt. So basically, they said we have reached a point. I mean, the judicial officers would say it is beyond reasonable doubt that you are who you said you are, and you have committed the offense that you said you've committed or not. So they will use the means test that says we have based on the evidence that has been presented, we can make the conclusion that we are making, or we reach the conclusion that we have reached. Now, in a research space, we are going to use internal validity. So in other words, if you say to me, fire causes smoke, you have got no doubt that, you know, the variable fire is responsible for the variable smoke. So the relationship between these two variables, fire and smoke, has been established, that fire and smoke do have a relationship. And what is the nature of the relationship between fire and smoke? It's more a causal relationship. The other one causes the other. So this is very, very important, ladies and gentlemen. But I'm saying I like it because when you look at the scenario, almost relates to the guilty of an offense that has been alleged to have committed or not guilty. Now, how do they get to that position? They get to that position because they should have collected evidence. Now, in your situation, you collect data, which then brings about that evidence that leads to you when you analyze it to come to a conclusion between what you do in your other environment to what we want to achieve within a research space. So in research, we are just turning those concepts for you so that then at least you understand them and you contextualize them also within your workspace. So research must not be divorced from your career and from your field. Then your learning is disintegrated, in my opinion. So you need to see what we are doing here, you know, in relation in the context of what you are doing in, you know, day to day. Because otherwise, if it doesn't achieve that, then your study is going to be extremely abstract and not relevant. So that's what we are trying to demystify, and hopefully we will be able to achieve that as we go along. So you are not in class to learn the concept as to making other people's life difficult, but you are in a space to try to understand how to improve your work scientifically, academically, but also as a discipline in the space that you are. I mean, I can only see law space, and I read the report that Refilwe is telling me about the protection of unmarried fathers. I can then decide how do I extrapolate that if it's a problem in Mabopane, or should we talk about where does Sergeant Nkosi come from? Maybe that place. If it comes from that place, and maybe we want to extrapolate, we might then say, how does this apply to another place in KZN or beyond? You know, how does this situation, the laws apply within our neighboring regions of SADC? You know, how does this apply in our continent? How does this apply internationally? You know, so that's just building blocks to how you add your knowledge to the discipline that you are studying. So never underestimate the work that you are doing as to the body of knowledge that you'll be adding to as well. How does this then influence the policy, you know, that regulates the protection of parents and the legal rights and the parental responsibilities? What if there's a gap? What if there's just a massive gap that there's nothing available? That then means, again, Refilwe will be producing something that will trigger, you know, interest for people to want to close that gap, because there's a gap, whether it's a legal gap, scientific gap, or academic gap. That's the reason why you do research. You know, that just to say, I've picked up that there is nothing that, you know, protect the people that are unmarried insofar as this is concerned, or there is insufficient protection for the people that, or these protections are in relation to the AI days and everything else, they are no longer relevant. So you can do anything and everything with what she is talking about. So there's never a point where you say, in that regard, ladies and gentlemen, I want to repeat what we did last week so we move on. Remember, we said you are moving out of the non-scientific to the scientific. So there's a systematic observation that you are going to do, meaning you are going to look at how much of this work that I want to do has been done. You might not be the first person to be doing this. It's acceptable. You know, how many people have done that? You know, so your observation must be systematic. So basically, you're going to take a certain group of people, units of analysis, as I said, the fathers, the unmarried fathers. So if married fathers come and say, yeah, but what about us? If other fathers come and say, yeah, but I've gone through this myself, they may not fit the profile of the people that you want to. So Refilwe wants to go into systematic observation. Now that's the control where you say, I want this particular category of people that would be relevant to my subject, and I want them to give me information. Now, later on, coming from Tembisa, I would like to interact with the work that Refilwe has done. What do? Then I follow your steps, Refilwe. Everything else that you have done, I should then be able to come to the same conclusions as the ones that you have, because I'm going through your manual. So 10 years down the line, 5 years down the line, I'm following on your footsteps. This is the reason why in research you document the process. Unlike perhaps in other environments where you don't want people to know what you're doing, in research it's an open, transparent process because it's scientific. So if I follow that process, I need to be able to replicate or arrive at the same kind of conclusion. It's very possible that I may not, but those would be the reasons that we will be able to deal with when you say, why did I not arrive at the same conclusions as Refilwe at the time? Now, I can then be able to explain all those, and there's a reason for all that. So basically, that's what you're doing, systematic observation, control, and replication. But ordinarily, in terms of the scientific principles, you should be able to arrive at the same conclusion if you have controlled the phenomenon and the variables, and you've observed the variable system, in a systematic manner. Now, remember, I said last week, and I want to repeat this so that as we move forward, as we will move back, we are still at the point now where we said we are step 1, research topic, research problem, or unanswered question. So we are now grappling with, I'm sitting at home, I see a lot happening, and I want to pick a topic that is of interest to me. Some of the topics that we will choose are personal. It might be that I've had this kind of a personal exposure or experience or whatever it is, and I would like to understand it from a point of view of my own pain and who else is sharing my pain. It's okay. You can also look at that and then compare it with everybody else and come to a conclusion. I mean, other people become great ambassadors because they've gone through certain experiences. It's allowed. I mean, it's personal experiences that will also guide your research. Other issues are just out of curiosity of living in a community where you see the things that you see and they pique your brain. I mean, so they pique your interest and you run with them. Other people is because now they are compelled to pick a topic because they have to provide for a mini dissertation. So there's many ways that we will be able to pick a topic, but we'll talk to that just now. We said that is the first thing that you should have in your mind. When you register for a master's and they say to you, you need to have a mini dissertation, you already have some ideas. They might be so convoluted, they might be so chaotic, they might be so unstructured, they might be so all over. It's okay. What we are then going to do is, this is an exercise where we're trying to define them and to refine them for you so that then you've got an idea of how you now have, developing your research topic for purposes of your study. And at the same time, what this will do is, the first topic, when you look at it and you look at the final topic, there must be day and night between or amongst them. Because your first version is just what you think, and it's almost like when you write a book. The first thing is you're very excited about it, and 10 pages later you realize, oh my goodness, I've run out of ideas. But the time you now produce the 300, 400 pages book, you will know exactly what you've gone through, the whole process and so on. So this is pretty much normal for you to go through that. That right now you may have a good topic, you may have a very long topic, you may have a very unstructured topic. It's okay. At least it's an idea that we require. Now, as we go through these steps, ladies and gentlemen, we then will want to say we will refine all this so that by the time you reach the point where you say this is now a full proposal, you have gone through each of all these 7 or 5 or 6 steps depending on which source you use. You know what is your goal or what is your aim. I did not push Refilwe through this 7 steps, but it's very easy to say that. I mean, we can go through it and say, what is your aim? This is what she thinks is the aim or the goal of the study. Have you studied or read, about it? Not as yet, maybe not as extensively as it's supposed to be. What is the design? Are you going to be interviewing people, or you're just going to rely on the court judgment and articles and maybe decisions that have been made and rulings and so on? All those are the questions that has to be answered throughout this process. And by the time she then says, oh, I've done with everything, and this is how I'm going to collect my data, this is how I'm going to analyze it, and this is the report. It's already 300 pages long, or maybe 10 pages long, or maybe 5 pages long, whatever. So the number of pages will not matter insofar as this process is concerned. What will matter is your understanding of how you take your topic and really put it into a proposal situation. And this is exactly what we are trying to do. Is there any comment, any question, reflection thus far?
Hey, Prof, I've been swallowing what Refilwe and the other gentleman, OS, let me say OS. Yeah, Obake, yes, I remember the name now. Yeah, so I've been swallowing all that, Prof, and some of what you have guided us specifically with what Refilwe was coming with.
Yes.
But Prof, I think I have undergone all this material that you are dealing with now, because my research proposal was accepted, and then I was credited for it. And my main interest specifically is mini dissertation. So I get all that the other colleagues have said, but mine now, because I am enlightened specifically with the research part.
Talk to us about the mini dissertation. What is the challenge? I remember there was a point last week that was said. So now that you have gone through this research, what is your mini dissertation issue about? What is your interest?
That is where my problem lies, Prof. Because right now, what I've done, I've written something out of that mini dissertation, because I am still confused with how to format it, because with the research, it was done and then I completed it. Now my confusion is, because there are certain topics that I listed on the research. I've started with writing one topic, the first topic that I said I will deal with, and then of course the other topics are still outstanding. I'm still busy with the first topic.
Let's take me through that topic, because I'm a bit not sure I follow you well, Musa, in relation to the mini dissertation. Let's take one topic. I mean, if I were to go back to Refilwe, I would have said we can take through Refilwe's discussion into a mini dissertation all the way, right? But now, let's give Refilwe a break now. She's drinking water. Let's take your situation. You say you do understand all this, but I want you to say to me, this is the topic that you have planned, looked into from a research point of view. Let's dissect it.
Yeah.
What is it?
Yes, Prof. Prof, my topic with the research was the impact of vigilantism in South Africa on the right to human dignity, life, freedom, and security of the person. That was the topic of the research.
The impact. Just repeat that. So you're looking at impact of vigilantism.
Of vigilantism, yes. Yes, Prof.
Okay.
In South Africa, yes, on the right dignity. It was specifically section 12 of the Constitution. I phrased it on that specific section of the Constitution. Now, I was looking at the impact of it now on the South Africans, the population, especially the ones that will be subjected to it. And I deal with it a lot in the courts. So I was looking at this topic specifically to write about it, and then and its impact on the dignity of the people, the life, and the freedom and security of them as well. So now what I did is, Prof. Yeah, what I did is, and then I drafted.
No. Let me interject.
Okay.
Let me interject. Please allow me.
Yes, Prof.
Because I don't want to. I don't want all of us to lose you. Now, if that was the topic, you are now. For me, there's. I like it because you said is based on a particular section in the Constitution, for example. But remember now, you said impact of vigilantism on the right to dignity, right?
Yes, Prof.
Now, what is your view? What is it about it? Where are you coming from with it? Because if you say to somebody, I'm going to look at the impact of vigilantism on the right to integrity, you have a view already. You have an assumption, right?
Yes.
What is your assumption?
Prof,
in other words, what is your hypothesis? I'm using the word assumption loosely, but I want to say, what are you testing here? Or what are you intending to test?
Yes, Prof, but my assumption was looking at the view that this vigilantism, it impacts specifically in people because it takes away their rights that I've mentioned. Now, my view was that as much as we experience it and then it has become normal, but in fact it's not something that we need to accept. Although we live with it, but
do you realize, Musa, that we don't understand your topic insofar as focus area? Now you're saying impact of vigilantism, the right to dignity. I mean, so is it dignity? Yes, I agree with you from that point. But who are you focusing at? Because if you talk about victims, right, you must be specific as to which victims are we talking about, because it's not common that wherever we are there is vigilantism. So it must be contextualized. Where is this happening? Where are you focusing on?
Yes, Prof. The main focus, Prof, was specifically people living in the rural areas where they do not have facilities like the police. Yeah, I was saying that I was focusing on vigilantism specifically affecting people in the rural areas.
Exactly. So that talks to I want to interject. That already is telling me what Refilo was saying, narrowing it.
Yes.
Because now you are talking about vigilantism, but is within a particular context. You see, there's a huge difference in what you've just said now.
Yes.
So essentially what you have just done is you're now saying, I'm not going to look at vigilantism from everywhere else, but maybe within rural areas. But I would still push you and say, when you talk about rural areas in South Africa, you're talking about the huge size of the piece of South Africa. Are you looking at rural areas everywhere, in Tembe, in the KZN, Thohoyandou, in Venda, Kuruman, Katu in Kuruman, where are you looking at? Eastern Cape? Because now that's too general.
Yes.
So where are we?
Yes, Prof. Prof, when I was writing the research, because now I was tempted with the with dissertation, I also included areas such as the Northwest, but partially, not much, because my specification with it was the KZN, because we experience it a lot, although we live in the in urban areas, but the people not too far from where we live, their matters, they will come to our courts, specifically the regional courts and the High Court, of course, where
that also makes another from a
Yes.
research point of view, a mini dissertation point of view, it also makes another interesting point to make, because then you can say with a particular reference to, say, for example, KZN or Northwest, it changes what you are talking about. Again, to say, oh, so you are not just going to be looking at the vigilantism from a point of vigilantism's sake, but you are also going to look at the impact of it insofar as the right to dignity is concerned, but in a particular community. That's a massive, massive researchable discussion we are talking about.
Yes.
So the reason why I'm saying this to you, Musa, although it's you who's sharing your information, I'm using it just so that, we share in this discussion. So I'm saying, if I listen to your topic, very, very important, is the impact of vigilantism, right, as insofar as the right, it impact on the right to dignity of victims, but you are now saying you've narrowed it down to particular communities.
Yes.
So if you're not saying that, I would then say your topic will still need, some nice refining going forward. Now, with that in mind, now I have got an idea of your topic. Let's just say we work with your topic. Then the next question is going to say, what is the aim in your view? Because remember, you're still abstract. It's still not yet, you have not done the research. You're still planning for it, because a proposal, a mini dissertation is what you are planning to do. So my next question will be, what is the aim of, what do you think is your intended aim of what you want to achieve?
The intended aim, Prof, is that I want my research. I wanted my research, stroke dissertation as well, to enlighten specifically people who are living in these affected areas, specifically those rural areas that I mentioned. That people need to be aware that it's abnormal for people to come together and take the law into their own hands without involving
it's not maybe abnormal, and I know you are in a legal field. In research, abnormal may not necessarily. I think is it lawful to do so?
Yeah, it's unlawful, of course. It's unlawful, Prof.
So I would go with what is the state, what is the situation? Because if it's not legal, then it must not be done. But when it is done, you want to understand why are people doing it, because it's not supposed to be done. Your point of curiosity is, this is not supposed to be done, but people are doing it. So your curiosity is, why are you doing it? Because the law doesn't allow, for it to do it. What do you think are the reasons why people are doing it? Now, that is what you are trying to tease out from people, to say, you're not supposed to do this, but I see it happening quite a lot. And do you know that it impacts on the people that are inflicted by this? Yes, we do. But then why are you doing it? How do you think people will not be responding to you when you ask that question? They will.
They will, Prof.
And that's where you're going with it, because for me, when you use the word impact, I already have a research question problem, because I don't think you've got an issue that it will impact on the victims and their rights, but perhaps is the question you want to know is that why is it that people are doing it despite the fact that it has got negative consequences, not only to the victim, in terms of the violation of the right, but also maybe to the people around the victim, the family, and everybody else. But then the question is, why are people doing it? And that will be, for me, you asking that in your minute test. If you were to do a full research, you'd say, let me read literature on, we are now moving the next line, which is now the literature review. What is it, in your view, Musa, that triggers that people are doing vigilantism despite the fact that it is abhorrible and it is unlawful? Why do they do it? What do you think? And I'm just giving you an opportunity to share what you already know from your dissertation. Why are people doing it?
Yes, the main reason that I wrote about was people they feel that the police are not doing their work in arresting the perpetrators. But at the same time, having said that, they themselves, now the people who are affected, they are not assisting the police by naming or giving out specifically the people that are suspected to have committed those offenses, or when the police want them now to come to court for being witnesses now, they do not avail themselves for that. So now the people that are arrested for a suspicion of having committed a particular crime, what happens is those people now, the courts will find them either not guilty or matters in court will be withdrawn. And then the very same people who are causing havoc within communities, they come back and live with them and continue causing havoc. And then they decide then that, no, let's just take the law into our own hands.
Okay. And
Yes.
And now you are going to study, you are now going to study this phenomenon. What then are you going to suggest? Let's just take that main reason you wrote about. Remember, you are now going to read about vigilantism in South Africa, in different communities all over the world. Now you know, because you have read, you have done what we call literature review. So you've read about what others have written about. Now you say, how do you then address that that situation that you wrote about as to the main reason? How do you deal with that? Because remember, the people are responding to a perception that the police are not doing their work, and therefore they do that which they are doing. What is what are you going to do about that? Or what is the intention now that we've got an idea of it?
The intention is to make them aware specifically that vigilantism is also a criminal offense, because it involves there will be kidnappings, there will be assaults, and then sometimes those assaults, they lead to murder, because some of these people that are assaulted, they die. And then the very same people now who are trying to solve a problem of crime are themselves now perpetrators of other crimes as well, on the very same people who are causing havoc in them. And then they end up going to prison themselves.
Yeah. Yeah. So that's what you are trying. So you're trying to introduce, but how does that assist the fact that people are saying police are not doing their work? We are being agitated because we see people walking into a police station one way and then coming out the other way. So we think that there has been a lot of bribery going on. What then do you do with that?
The research here will also give some suggestions that the people now need to work hand in hand with the police to assist them, especially with giving out the names of people who are suspected of committing crime, and also assisting them in testifying in courts. when they are needed by the police. So
Okay.
that is the part that I put also on the research, that they need to work with the specifically the police
Okay. Okay.
instead
So,
of them taking law into their own hands.
but you see now, and I'm happy with that, because basically you are now saying you are now going to have to empower. Basically, you have to empower everybody who is a stakeholder on understanding the processes that need to be, what is the word I'm looking for? Need to be followed in an event that there's a situation that is agitating community. Now, that will be one of
Yes.
your recommendations going forward, because how do you know that? You must have collected data from community
Yes.
that you have analyzed, and you are suggesting a solution to the problem.
Yes.
Now, the next question I will ask you is, then how are you going to collect data from the communities that you are intending to study? How are you going to get that information, which informs you to a point where you then say, I would like to make this recommendation based on the information collected? How are you going to collect it? Or where does this information come from?
I won't say that all the information is from the members of these communities that are affected, that I interviewed, but I also got other information from the writings from other academic writers.
Sources,
also,
yeah.
I stole from it. Yeah.
Yes. You are okay. You don't steal. We don't steal. You have to refer. We will talk to references soon. We don't steal anything. We're just going to do a proper referencing to avoid what we call plagiarism, isn't it?
Yes, but I made it sure that I credited them.
Yes, no, that is not stealing. Yeah, that's not,
Yes.
that is referencing them and crediting them as well. So it's a
Yes.
perfect, there's nothing wrong with it. It's allowed.
Yes.
So we will be discussing referencing in our next engagement as to what is the correct way of referencing. But I am saying you now have been guided by other sources that have informed and helped you to shape your theory. And at the end of the day, do you see what it means? You go through the entire process, but the idea here, Musa, is just to show you that you have just outlined your dissertation. The only difference, remember, is that you are not going to go out there and physically do that which you want to do. That is at the dissertation level.
Yes, Prof.
So you will be required to put it together. It's almost like you'll be required to put a menu, but you don't have to do the physical cooking of whatever you put on the menu. That's what the dissertation in this context will do. So you know how to bake, but they don't allow you to really get to the stove and do the baking.
Yes.
So
Prof.
you put every ingredient and you tell us, this is what I'm going to do. These are the communities these are the people I'll interview. This is the data that I'm going to collect. This is what I'm going to analyze. So you got to that point, but then you cannot take that proposal and go out and do. That is what we were discussing right now when you talk about the mini dissertation. So you've just outlined your mini dissertation with comments that we were giving as we were going along, as we were interjecting you. I hope it makes some sense at least.
It made a lot of sense, Prof.
And the reason why we're pushing in the way that we are doing, that I'm doing now, is just to assist you to look at your own study, your own research, and reflect on it and make adjustments, because you understand it better. You know what you want better. All what you're doing is, as we tweak it, as we move around and engaging, I'm saying bring those principles of research into it. Then you've got the full proposal. Then you've got the full dissertation. Then you've got the mini dissertation. So once I say, what is the aim? You know that the aim is part of your proposal. Yeah. What are the literature review? In other words, what did you read? I read this. How did you reference them? I referenced them this way. What does it does? It actually helps you to shape your own understanding of the proposal discussion that we are talking about. I hope it makes sense to people
Yes,
on the
Prof.
platform. Julia, are we making sense to you? We don't want to leave anyone behind.
Yes, Prof. It
Are
makes
we
a lot
making
of sense.
It's making sense to you?
Yes, sir.
Oh, I'm glad. We don't want to leave. Is there any question, any comment thus far? And as I said, we don't want to make this concept, abstract and far-fetched and that you cannot relate to. So if you find there is something that you are talking about and it's not making sense, please shout. In this environment, it's allowed. Anybody who's got a view that they want to shout on something, please go ahead. I think is it Calvin?
Yes, Prof. It's
Go
Calvin.
ahead, please, Calvin.
Yes, Prof. There's just something that I just want to find out from you. I've also registered for mini dissertation, and today I got my letter, a confirmation letter with the topic, and
Okay.
and also the supervisor. But then
Congratulations.
yes, I haven't responded. Maybe just to for clarification on certain issues, because there's on the topic they indicated that I need to discuss expropriation under South African law. But then I just want to find out from you whether that topic, as indicated on the letter, is it the one that I need to concentrate on, or I need to narrow it and concentrate on something else within the expropriation? Because my understanding is that looking at the expropriation on its own, it's just a wide studies that, to be honest, it can yield so many dissertations and so on. That's what I want to find out from your side, because I was even thinking to say, okay, if really I'm allowed to really narrow it and concentrate on a certain part of the expropriation, yes, I will be able to go through this other topic.
Okay. Congratulations, but I don't know why you are worried about that, because it must be then interesting to you that there is many areas of expropriation that you can focus on, if I understand you well, Calvin. So in other words,
exactly,
if you take expropriation and you're using it within the South African context, then you're saying there can be many dissertation that can come out of it. Isn't that what you need as well? A topic that is broad enough that you will be able to find a niche where you then say, okay, there are these many areas of expropriation, in South Africa, focusing on this and this and that. But for my purpose and for my interest, I'm going to focus on X. And based on this is what I'm going to do. Because at the mini dissertation level, you are just going to put it together and say, how would expropriation look? And if it has got many dimensions, many areas of, even better for you. So what is your concern? Is your concern that is broad, or is because the topic that it does not give you enough to work with is a concerning topic. But the topic that gives you a lot of information to work with is a better topic, in my view, because then it gives you space to come up with your own ideas on how it must be done. I mean, I'm looking at expropriation without compensation, the most controversial policy situation in South Africa that is not yet implemented as yet. Or if it's implemented with a whole lot of other fears and concerns and so on. So what exactly is a concern for you, Calvin? Because I'm saying my view is that you need to say, once it's approved, of course you can refine it, but better to understand expropriation in its broadest sense, and then you narrow it down yourself when you do the actual proposal to say what will be your area of interest within expropriation. Am I making sense, or am I just frustrating you more?
No, I really understand. I really understand what you have just explained, because that was just my concern to say that looking at expropriation itself, it's something which is very wide. Then how am I going? Are they going to allow me to narrow this topic at least so that I concentrate on a certain specific area of expropriation?
Yes.
But
Yes.
then your
It will be
explanation
allowed.
is really indicates
It will be
because
allowed. Oh, they will
Okay.
allow it, but I'm saying from the broader sense of view, you need to take it first in its broader sense, because that's how you problematize it, isn't it? You create a
yes,
problem to say, what are the problems of expropriation that you are able to relate to in your problem statement? And what does the literature say about expropriation, as a concept? And what is the area that you feel you need to focus on with expropriation? So now you already know this is a problem, this is what literature say, and this is how I would like to get involved with expropriation, from a research point of view.
Oh, okay. Because what I've done today, I've just looked at some of the issues. Like, for example, the other topic that I have is saying, is compensation of expropriation a requirement or a pre-requirement under South African law?
Exactly. And
Yeah,
what is the answer? So the answer is not going to be a yes or no, but the answer is
Yes.
going to be you now getting in-depth understanding of the various South African laws that are dealing with compensation, and then you might be pointing us in a direction that none of us were looking.
Yes.
Or you might be strengthening a policy of the country that at least was not being implemented, and say, go ahead, maybe implement this, because there is nothing that stops you from doing it. So it's an interesting topic, if you ask me.
Okay. I think now I'm very clear, because I decided to go with this topic because I've seen so many matters that we have been dealing with on expropriation, and in most cases people prefer they thought that compensation on its own, it's a requirement or a pre-requirement of expropriation, while it's not. It's just a requirement like any other requirement that at the end of the day can be dealt with after the expropriation has been finalized. Those are the things that I'm saying,
I see.
because
I see.
because even some court cases or some court decisions, a recent one, I can see that some of the people are still having that mind of saying that compensation, all in all, compensation, it's a pre-requirement. While it's not a pre-requirement, it's just a requirement that also needs to be fulfilled. It doesn't matter. It's not an issue that needs to be dealt with while you are still dealing with the expropriation. You can do expropriation and finalize everything, and then deal with the issue of compensation at a later stage.
So what is your full topic, if I may ask?
My full topic, I only wanted to concentrate on the issue of compensation, just to indicate whether is it a requirement or a pre-requirement of expropriation in terms of the South African law, or in terms of section 25 subsection 3. That is where I really want to concentrate on, other than looking at the full expropriation itself. Yes, I understand in terms of the introduction and so on. Obviously, I will have to touch the full expropriation
Yes.
explanation before I
Yes.
come to the issue of the compensation.
Oh, okay. No. I think I'm happy with that. It is a topic and a discussion that we'll still pursue because we are at the proposal stage and you have already put it together. So please always feel free to jump in as we speak about the proposal, because for me it makes sense that you'll be broad and then you'll become narrow at some point. I'm happy with that.
Okay, thank you.
All right. I'm going to request that we take just a 3 minutes comfort break, and then we look at the guidelines on choosing a topic as we come back. Let's take a comfort break. Now, let's just look at the principles. These are just guidelines, ladies and gentlemen. It's not a must. It's not to suggest that you cannot do anything without them. It's just guidelines. So let's look at some of them. Now, one, we say look around you when you want to choose a topic. There's a lot of questions where you live, where you work, that need answers. I mean, I was just listening now as we were engaging Calvin about expropriation. Whatever it is, whatever angle, whatever perspective he has taken interest in that. So I was just listening to you and I'm thinking to myself, there we go. There's a question that needs an answer, and he has taken it upon himself that he's going to make attempts to answer those questions. So you just have to look around. As I said, you don't need something complex. You don't need something extremely difficult. You can just answer a question at work, at home. You know, you watch television, you see some programs, you're on YouTube, you're on TikTok, whatever social media you're on ChatGPT, GPT, whatever. So there are questions everywhere, and those questions need you to answer them. So that is one of the things that you need to remember, that as a researcher, you can pick up areas as you walk around, you look around, and that can just be a topic on its own. Then you need to read the existing research literature about the topic. So basically what you do is casually you just had interest on compensation, no compensation, family law, no family law, labor law, whatever it is that is of interest to you. Then you go and you read a little bit about it. It doesn't have to be a formal reading. It can just be casual reading. And before you know it, you may actually be surprised that you've collected so much information on your topic of interest, and you've already found out things that are known and they're believed about your topic. So you already know what people believe. They actually believe that there is this view, and it might turn out not to be the right belief. Because that's very easy when we handle things casually. I mean, you were just saying now, Calvin, that it looks like there's a prerequisite for compensation, and the understanding, I can assure you, is completely different from everyone else. Now, you then focusing on it, working systematically and control, you might actually just come out of an inquiry and say, did you know that you don't need this to expropriate? This is what, then there might be an argument, there might be a debate. All you need to do is to back it up with evidence. And in this case is evidence from the material that you are using and evidence from the data that you have collected and so on and so on. So you become ahead of all of us because you're sitting with knowledge. Thirdly, and again, I'm saying these are just guidelines. There's nobody that says you should only work with them. Thirdly is you need to seek advice of experts. You can ask an expert. And when they say experts, I mean, sometimes you find yourself in a space where you are in court, Musa, and there are people who have been dealing with issues that some of which you are dealing with at that particular time. There's no harm in asking some of them, pertinent questions related to what you're doing, because they can also assist you in your formulation of your topic. For example, you can ask them what needs to be done about vigilantism. What burning questions are still out there? In other words, what is it that has not been asked about vigilantism? There's always one or two questions that some people did not ask before you, as they were doing their research. What are those questions? What are the previous research findings seemingly don't make sense? In other words, on vigilantism and the right to victims, to their dignity. What is it that did not make sense? You know, vigilantism come in many ways and is triggered by many situations, and you can then get into it and say, what is it? That is also shaping your research situation or a research topic in a way that you will have an angle that you are pushing in your research situation. So, fourthly, it's always advisable as a student of research to attend conferences, because conferences are places where, as a novice researcher, for example, you may contact with more experienced researchers, you ask questions, you share ideas. It's a networking opportunity. So when you go to a conference, there's always going to be people like yourself who share some similar ideas, but who are also willing to share as much as possible, because sharing in a space of research is what encourages ideas from growing. So if you can attend conferences, I know that it's not always easy, because when you are at UNISA and you are working, you are a family a person, so there's just too many competing priorities. But where possible, you attend conferences, because from conferences of similar nature, I mean, if you go to a conference, family law conference, you almost always going to pick up areas that sort of encourages you or improve on your own work as well. So it is advisable that you should consider doing that, because there will be topics that are there for the taking as well, and you can also be guided by people who are already in that space. Choose a topic that intrigues and motivates you. There's nothing as frustrating as a researcher that when you do research over time, if a research is going to take time, let's say 2 to 3 years, you lose interest along the way. Now, if you begin to take something that is not of interest to you, you can imagine you are bored to death and you still have 2 years to go in your research, or whatever the case might be. So it is always advisable that as a researcher, try to look at something that will be of interest to you and that motivates you, because as a researcher, you'll also need energy to start and to finish the work that you are doing. So at some point, you need to pick at one topic, because you might have 10,000 ideas that you have, but at some point you need to decide, I'm going for this one and I have interest in it, and I hope that I'm going to learn more from that. Choose a topic that others will find interesting and worthy of attention. For example, if you choose a topic that nobody will be interested in, you yourself, you are going to find that you're demotivated. Now, when you talk to family members, friends, colleagues, your acquaintances about your topic, if they find it interesting, you must know maybe it's worthy of attention. So because your research adds an important piece to what is already known by human race. So when you sit with people and you're discussing with them about expropriation, I mean, their eyes must light out that this is an interesting topic. But as a researcher, I think when you listen to how they interact with the discussion, you might actually appreciate, the angle that you are taking. And how people understand about the world, it's important. Then you'll want to share your findings with a larger audience. Because if you choose a topic that is interesting and worthy of attention, now when you are ready with the findings, you're more likely to attract a lot more people that will be interested. People follow things that they are interested in. They don't follow things because you say so. I can imagine right now, South Africans and other people in the world are interested in certain geopolitical challenges that are happening. Not because somebody told them to, but because they're interested. If they don't have interest, it doesn't matter how much you market, how much you sell the idea to. So even in your research, it will be very interesting when you were then to share your findings with a larger audience, sharing your research ideas, because when you are a researcher, one of the most important achievement is when you are able to get audience to listen to you sharing your research findings and engaging you on it, because that just improves on your on your work as well. Because remember, you are not doing research just to acquire the certificate. In some instances, yes, it is, but you're also doing it in order to improve your capability and capacity to do more research and hopefully make money out of it as well. I mean, because this is also another area that we can confirm that as a country, we are not producing enough of researchers as a country. Hopefully some of you will go beyond just a mini dissertation and become researchers, because you'll complete your PhDs and not only look for promotions at work, but saying, I want to start, generating knowledge in the area of my liking. Be realistic about what you can accomplish. As a researcher, also be realistic on what is it that is within your reach. Much time, in other words, how much time it will take for you to collect the necessary data is important. Will you need to travel great distances to get the data? I mean, if you say you are going to do something for South Africa, I already see a challenge, because some of the research projects that people are doing are not funded from deep pockets. So therefore, traveling costs could be huge hindrance. So you need to think about that. Will you need to travel great distances to get it data? If yes, try to reduce the focus area so that you don't have to spend a lot of money on that. Will you need expensive equipment? Sometimes all what you need is just a pen and paper, Excel spreadsheet, and basic stuff. So also try to minimize getting into a research project that is going to need you to bring expensive equipment, unless you've got, like I'm saying, enough budget for that. Will the research project require knowledge and skills that is far beyond those that you currently have? So in other words, are you going to be required to call on experts, to come and test and pay them for the time that they're going to spend with you, or it's something that you need to? So those are the questions that you need to consider, so that you don't end up calling. I mean, if I look at an inquiry right now, the CRADOC 4 inquiry about the TRC, they may then need a lot of forensic, a whole lot. It's not unnecessary, it's not unimportant. It's just that now you can see how expensive that is going to be for government as well. Because you also need, some kind of expertise, not some kind, a lot of expertise, people who are knowledgeable, and over time, a whole lot has happened. So you need to be mindful of that as a researcher. Most research problems are too large or complex to be solved without subdividing them. So in other words, when you're going to do your research, also try to make your research simple and not too large. I mean, you can imagine if you're going to be working with South Africans, it's a lot of people to work with, but you can also choose to work with a sample, within your workspace, in your area where you work, closer to your community and so on. Why is it that important? So that you don't make your study too complex for your own good. So these, ladies and gentlemen, are just some of the guidelines. And as I said, I mean, there is nothing that stops you from using any other guideline that you come across. The idea here is just be clearer on how you want to choose your topic, bring it for engagement, refine it, up to a point where we can all agree that it is a researchable topic for your own sake as well. There are people who want to go and study the world, but then you will realize that very soon that you might need interpreters, because there are people who speak Portuguese in the world, there are people who speak French in the world, there are people who speak other languages in the world. Now you might want to bring interpreter for those kind of cases. That then turns out to be expensive, when all you can do is and we are not saying if you can't do it, you shouldn't do it. We are just trying to say where you are able to reduce costs linked to your study, please consider that. So this, in a nutshell, ladies and gentlemen, are some of the guidelines that I think you need to look for when you're doing your research when you're choosing your research topic, or when you are identifying a question that you need answers for, because that's what research is all about. Any comment, any question so far? Are we good?
My concern is I've got the topic. My concern is more on whether I'll be able to come up with a 30-pager of the proposal.
The what?
The 30 pages of the proposal, that is my concern. And again, my topic, for me, it seems to be broad. And I know it has been done, but except there's another leg that I think maybe I could explore it, and maybe that is what will set apart my research against the ones that already exist. So I'm hoping I'll be choosing right in that regard. I don't know if I can talk about it, but maybe.
Yeah, please do. I'm not following you.
Okay. All right. So my topic is around legal representation, and I know that it has been done a lot. Just when I search, that's what I've realized. But I want to go the angle of children, especially in children's court. And I also thought maybe I could include persons with disabilities, because I know that they are still trying to develop their legal framework, which in it will be clear that there is that right, but other than that, they do have the right in terms of a constitution. So I thought I could go that angle and also just show what challenges exist, whether it could be language, whether it could be not really taking into account their type of disability, because the disabilities really vary. And it might be that they then do not really understand the court proceedings. And of course, how can we then develop the law further in order to be inclusive, but also to be accommodative? Yeah, so those are my thoughts around the topic.
So at what stage are you normally in relation to that?
I'm still busy with the proposal.
So what is the... Oh, sorry. Please go ahead.
Yes, I've got the draft, but I haven't been able to share it.
So what is your... I mean, the 30, I don't know, you were talking about 30 pages. Where does the 30 pages come from?
It comes from the tutorial letter.
Oh, okay. That is, the minimum is 30 pages.
Yeah. Yes.
But that 30 pages is not that long, because are you required to also do some literature review or not yet?
Not yet.
So you just have to outline the problem.
Yes.
Now, when you outline the problem, do they look at, I mean, they will probably ask you, where do you have to have some kind of references, isn't it?
Yes, yes.
So what is the situation right now on the area, that area that you're interested in, that you are able to relate to? Is there some ideas that you already have on that?
Yes, I do have some ideas currently, especially when one looks at the different disabilities. I think our course have developed insofar as the language, in terms of deaf people. But in terms of other disabilities, I think there's still a challenge. And I think when one has regard to the Children's Act, it says we need to use experts. And I think our courts are not using them optimally, but also the challenge is it is put to you as the parent to source the services of the experts. It could be a social worker.
Oh, I see.
Yes, and unfortunately, most of the parents would not then afford the
that, yeah,
services.
if it comes at a cost.
Yes, and
So
then
what is then your focus to look at how to reform those kind of services that should be made available?
yes,
Okay, I think you and Refilo might have some conversation to have, isn't it?
yes,
Because you're going to look at what is the situation on the law right now, and what you want to raise as problems. That, I mean, if you were to give me that as an indication of, I already see a problem that you are pushing up front to say, look, given the fact that South Africa is an unequal society in the world, how then do you even imagine that some families will be able to afford services of experts? Isn't that on its own as some kind of an injustice?
mm, mm, mm.
So
Yes.
so it already goes against the spirit of the constitution that we all believe into, that people must be able to access services and so forth and so on. So I think it's an interesting study. We're not gonna go and delve deeper into it, but I think you're welcome next time to present it so we can go through it, because it sounds to me that is another layer that the country needs to consider if they want to be seen to be implementing pro-poor policies.
Yes, thank you so much.
It sounds so interesting.
Thank you.
What is the challenge then in you putting it together for you to finalize it? I know it might sound a difficult question, but you can ignore it if you find it. But I think you must share with us, why are you not then finalizing the proposal?
I tell you what, I have put something together.
Okay.
But I think I still felt that it was short of more information, and
okay.
And also just a bit uncertain as to whether it was information that should actually find itself in the proposal as well. So,
I see.
yeah.
But remember, proposal, the first proposal is really just doesn't have to be very poor, but it's an idea that you want to engage your supervisor upon. It's never a final proposal. For me, if there's an understanding and there is an appreciation of where you want to go with it, that should be a good start, right? Because at least you've got the concept, you've got everything that is the building block for a proposal. So maybe you need to finalize it. Of course, if it's not due now, you can buy time. But it always feels better for some of us when something looks like it's finished. You take it to the next person, because that review on its own strengthens your proposal.
Thank you.
The engagement, you're now talking about it. It has to make it. I mean, it makes you think in another way about it. It's almost like saying, actually, I have a better view. I think I need to look at it this way and that way. That on its own, for me, is what we all need, because it improves your input. I mean, you can go and say, oh, maybe I did not consider this constitutional provision. Let me go and consider it. Or maybe I did not look at the possible legislative reform. Or maybe let me go look at it. You are allowed to do that during the proposal drafting, and also after the proposal, when there's a review, you can improve on it until you've got a final one submitted, because a proposal is a plan, and a plan needs to be almost, it has to go through a whole lot of other processes to be better. But for now, it sounds to me that you've got it covered.
Thank you so much.
You're welcome. I see, is it Ketane? Go ahead, please, Ketane.
I have already submitted my research proposal, and I've seemed to now hit a brick wall because I'm studying I'm doing my mini dissertation in labor law. However, when I was serving my articles as a CA, I had seen a gap, I'd seen a gap rather between labor law and refugee and the immigration law. So my topic is basically is a critical analysis of the right to social security for refugees and asylum seekers in the post-apartheid dispensation. So I don't know if I've perhaps maybe bitten too big of a chunk of the pie for me to be able to address this problem within the minute dissertation. And I don't know if this is the correct platform for me to ask for some sort of direction, because there's a lot of things, although there's many papers I think that I've seen that have ended about 2021. And now we're in 2026, and there's been no further research, if I may say, that tries to merge the two worlds together, because it is either on the labor law side or on the refugee and immigration law side.
Okay, so your topic is a critical analysis of the refugees' rights.
Oh no, there's a critical analysis of the right to social security. So social security being things like UIF and COIDA and all of those things. So it still falls within the field, or still falls within the field of labor law. However, it incorporates refugee and immigration law, because as I stated that previously, what I've seen a gap in that a lot of formally documented foreign nationals who come in under the Refugees Act would not be allowed to open bank accounts, would not be allowed to claim things like UIF because they don't have a 13-digit ID book to be able to claim those things. Those benefits or that social assistance would be deducted from them, but they wouldn't be able to claim such social assistance. Like with us South African citizens, we are given that
so
right.
What is the question for yourself?
So I wanted to analyze analyze the post-apartheid dispensation, particularly for foreign nationals within the field of labor law.
Yes, but I'm saying, what is the question then for? Because it sounds a very interesting topic to me.
Yes, sir. So I'm trying.
So what is the question then?
How would I go about merging the two worlds together? Because look, like I said, my research topic has been approved, but now I've hit a brick wall to say, how do I further approach it? Because the idea was there, and I saw that literature or papers haven't been written. I mean, look, like I said, the gap is between 2021 and we're in 2026. So how do I identify?
No, what I mean, sorry, Ketan, what I'm not getting from you, sorry to be rude, is that, what is it that you're not getting? Because I'm saying that from the topic, it sounds a great topic. Yes. What gap are you talking about?
No, I'm trying to figure out an approach and how to approach it, because in the talk that you've just provided now, is to say, don't get into something that will be too big of a mammoth of a task for you to be able to approach. But how do I approach it? I'm not asking for for you to spoon feed me anything, but to say.
But I thought you've got it covered, because you're saying you look at an analysis. So basically, from me, and can you please note that you'll still be welcome to raise it again when we meet. Okay. From what you are saying for me is that you are saying there are two eras.
Yes.
There was an apartheid era and there's a democratic period.
Yes.
And you are now checking how does this apply in the democratic period as is called. So you are comparing two periods for which this would have been applied differently. So this in terms of the migrant access to social security.
That's
right?
Correct.
And this will not be different largely to how, and I'm sure you're talking about South Africa. This will not be different from how social security was applied for Black people in South Africa as it is to white South Africans. So maybe there will be layers of that critical analysis. So it depends. Are you going to look at the policy provisions? Are you going to look at the applications? Are you going to look, those are the questions that you're going to look at. But I think it's not, for me, it sounds a great talk, because you can then say, maybe there hasn't been any change structurally from what it was and what it is today. There still might be the same situation that people who were, before, and those that are migrants today are treated in the same way. Maybe that's the situation. Or maybe there's a difference. If there is, you are the one who's then going to say, how do I deal with it? But maybe it might not be fair now to want to discuss it. But I think bring it again in the conversation. And yours is going to be a little tricky, because but interesting, by the way, because you're also dealing with a population that may not necessarily be, accessible. It's such a community.
Okay.
Because for you to talk about access, it's either access legally, or it's also access from those people that are having access, that needs to access the services, to ask them. Or so that's what I'm saying. Can you bring it again, and let's have another interaction with it, and we'll just see how we capture it in the topic that we'll be discussing next week. Are you, or next time when we meet? Is that a deal?
That's fine, Prof. Thank you very much.
Okay. All right. I think I see. Sorry, I rushed you there, but I'm also going to ask. Is it Tabea? Please go ahead.
Thank you, Prof. Good evening, colleagues.
Good
Sorry,
evening.
I missed the last session because I was not registered by then. So I'm just following you now. But I'm glad I've picked up advices there and there. So I'm on a proposal stage. I'm still drafting. So I was glad to hear that you were advising that we shouldn't pursue a research that will be too costly. That I do understand, because sometimes you're going to need expensive equipment and your pocket is not that deep. So the first time I wanted to draft something about the undocumented learners. Now, when I said I was having conversation with them, remember I'm staying in a place where there are so many undocumented people. So there are so many undocumented learners. So when we say sometimes it's going to be costly, and then I said, no, I will be having, when it's that time to do data analysis, then I will have a problem. Remember, we do have a situation in South Africa like Bududula and all of them. So I'm going to have a problem accessing this vulnerable group. And then again, I'm going to have a problem with language. I'm going to need translators, and then my pocket is not that deep. And then again, there are gatekeepers that I have to go through to, like the NGOs and institutional actors. So my topic is more policy oriented regarding the exclusion of undocumented learners from accessing tertiary education. Because as far as I know, there hasn't been any legislation that is closing this gap. There's still a gap. And from my interviews with them, it's still the same. So they cannot access tertiary education. So mine, I understood, it's okay. And then I have changed my topic a bit. Thank you.
Oh, okay. So you are changing the topic because of the possible impediments that you are foreseeing.
Correct.
Okay, let's talk about, can we talk about, sorry that you missed last week. You haven't missed much, but we hope that we're going to have you most of the time. But can we come back to that? Because I think maybe we can convince you to go back to it in the way that you thought you wanted to do it, and unless if you've really made up your mind about that, because it's a very interesting discussion, and research, Tabea, we've got no boundaries. We research anything. So please feel free. We even research how to work with NGOs and the doulas, because you heard what you might have missed what Musa was saying, that there are issues around vigilantism in the country. We also talk about that freely. So also with the population that may be migrant, we need to find a way to discuss it, but we can also assist you on how to access data from them.
All right. Thank you.
Yeah. So we can help you to generate how you're going to reach out to them without you really feeling, because you are raising impediments, and all you are saying is, how do I put my proposal in such a way that I can deal with these impediments and still remain with the academic rigor of this thing? So I think that is doable. But thank you very much.